Today is an important day to say, loud and clear, no national ID, no digital ID, no voter ID. On the 21st of February 1952, Winston Churchill's government scrapped ID cards. Why? In his words, to set the people free. Today, as we stand at the precipice of the government introducing a giant digital identity system, we look back on how Britain rejected different forms of ID time and again. At the beginning of World War II, every man, woman and child had to carry an ID card at all times. This came into force when the National Registration Act 1939 was passed as an emergency measure.
Good morning.
Are you the head of the house?
No, she's evacuated.
Anybody else living in the house?
Only me.
The main purposes were for evacuations, rationing and population statistics. 45 million paper cards were issued. But like most emergency measures, ID cards didn't go away after the war. Enter Harry Willcock, a 54-year-old London dry cleaner who was stopped in 1950 by a policeman who demanded to see his ID. He refused, telling him simply, "I am against this sort of thing." Mr. Willcock's seemingly small act of resistance inspired a movement. Soon after, the British Housewives League took to Parliament to set fire to their ID cards, in frying pans, no less. In 1951, Mr. Willcock was prosecuted, and the case reached the High Court, where he found sympathy from the judges. He was given an absolute discharge for his refusal to show his ID. Lord Chief Justice Goddard said that the way the police use the ID law tends to turn law-abiding subjects into lawbreakers. Such action tends to make the people resentful of the acts of the police.
We will pursue identity cards because they're right. We think it is legitimate and right in this day and age to ask people to carry identity cards.
The UK rejected ID cards again after, in the wake of 9/11, then Prime Minister Tony Blair told us we couldn't possibly fight terrorism without them. One Boris Johnson rallied against these plans. In fact, in 2004, Mr. Johnson said if he were asked to show his ID, he would physically eat it.
If I'm obliged to have an ID card by the emanations of the state, then I will take that ID card and I will snip it up and I will grind it in a Moulinex and I will eat it on my cornflakes.
What happened next? One of the most successful public campaigns of the decade, No to ID, was launched.
Conservatives have made, and all the opposition parties have made commitments to scrap not just the card but the database behind it. But what we really need is for the Act to be repealed. What we need is the same sort of definitive scrapping that we had back in 1952 after the Second World War, when Clarence Willcock said, you know, I'm a liberal. I don't believe in this stuff. I'm not going to have an ID card. That went all the way to the top and the whole thing got scrapped.
15,000 ID cards were issued. But then Home Secretary Theresa May pledged to scrap the ID cards within her first 100 days.
This is an important moment, I think, for the new coalition government. This is the first bill that we have published, the first bill that we're bringing before Parliament, and it's about saying that within 100 days we believe we can scrap the ID cards that we thought were wrong, that we thought would not work, and there was a civil liberties argument against them as well.
And Blair's ID was binned. But in 2021, Boris Johnson proposed to introduce vaccine ID cards, totally reversing his previous stance.
We'll also make the NHS COVID pass mandatory for entry into nightclubs and venues where large crowds gather. The NHS COVID pass can still be obtained with 2 doses, but we will keep this under review as the boosters roll out.
There was national outrage against COVID passes, and we ran one of our most successful campaigns.
It's not just an ID card, it's a digital ID card. It's not just a digital ID card, it's a medical digital ID card.
We won, achieving the biggest Tory rebellion of Johnson's premiership and the biggest parliamentary rebellion since the vote on the Iraq War.
Ayes to the right, 369. The noes to the left, 126.
Wow. The whoa you heard was because this Boris Johnson victory tonight came despite around 100 of his own MPs voting against him. They acknowledge he's seriously damaged.
But authoritarians will never leave the idea of mandatory national ID systems alone. Exactly a year ago, in February 2023, relentless ID card salesman Tony Blair struck again, this time with his former opponent and former Conservative Party leader Lord Hague by his side, with a grand Orwellian idea for a digital identity system.
It's the 21st century equivalent of the Industrial Revolution. And unless we as a country understand, and the politics of the country understand this revolution and try and harness it properly, then we're going to get left behind.
It then allows government to organise itself to have more personalised healthcare, to know what benefits people should be getting.
3 months later, mandatory voter ID was imposed on all Britons.
Parties that try and gerrymander end up finding that their clever scheme comes back to bite them, as, dare I say, we found by insisting on voter ID for elections, and we found that the people who didn't have ID were elderly, and they by and large voted Conservative. So we made it hard for our own voters, and we upset a system that worked perfectly well.
14,000 people were prevented from voting in local elections for not taking a photo ID to the ballot box with them. Today, the fight could be harder than ever. The government is introducing a giant digital identity system for all of us to access basic services like tax and benefits. Through one login, the government is creating the architecture needed to usher in a database state. That is why we're fighting to give you a legal right to say no to digital ID. The fight for privacy in identity systems is about more than just databases. It's about protecting the presumption of innocence and liberty, which is the basis of a free society. It's about empowering citizens against overbearing authorities. We're more than just a series of numbers, more than a barcode. The British public has consistently opposed mandatory ID systems. Let's not give up now. We've all got to do our bit to defend freedom at this perilous time. We can win this fight again, but we can only do it together. Be a part of the story. Join us today.